Welcome to the Black Male Impact. Today we have as guest Dr. Fernando Branch. Dr. Branch, welcome to the Black Male Impact.
Thank you. Thank you.
Man, it's a pleasure having you here with all the great work that you're doing, especially to empower the next generation. But I'll say this before we get into the questions, and I'll allow you to talk more about yourself as well, so the listeners can get to know you a little bit more before we get into the questions. But Dr. Branch is a speaker, he's a community builder, consultant, and a culture builder. He's also part of the K-16 Education Championship and Partnership Development and Strategic Alliance, and also a mental health leader. And that is something that we need today more than ever, someone to guide all of us at times on this journey on developing or becoming better at our mental health. So Dr. Branch, please do share more about yourself before we get into the conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Cross. Super happy to be here. I think I'm an HBCU graduate, graduate of the University of Arkansas Pine Bluff. Just recently finished my doctorate at the University of Denver.
Congratulations.
Just a lifelong educator. Been in the philanthropy space by way of nonprofits the last couple years, and now I'm serving as a principal, interim principal at Robert L. Smith STEAM Academy here in Denver, Colorado. So just really love the work that I'm doing, both in the philanthropy space as well as in K-12 education, and just really feel like I'm living my life purpose.
Man, that's great. That's great. And I know you also a part of the Colorado Men of Color. How is that going? Although we will talk more about that as we continue the conversation. But when I saw that, I thought that was really impressive. I didn't really know that it exists until I really came across the work that you're doing. But if you don't mind, share, and hopefully we get to talk more about it when we get into the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So the organization is called CMOC. It's the Colorado Men of Color Collaborative, and it came about. It actually came out of COVID. We recognized here in Colorado that there weren't any organizations that were being preventative in supporting men of color, especially Black men. And we can probably get into it later, but the idea and the goals of the organization is to support mental health awareness and strategies for coping and dealing with traumatic situations in which men sometimes all the time deal with, but just don't have a community to talk to about social mobility, increasing access to opportunities to elevate our men. And the last thing was around career exploration and access, bringing corporations, organizations, people who are at the C-suite level in organizations together with talented men of color and give them an opportunity to not only learn, but just be in the same room and engaging in very unique conversations around social mobility. So it's the only organization of its kind.
Wow.
It's not led by it's led by me, but the organization is built for community, serving community from community, and in that sense, it's pretty dynamic because it's a one mic model where the members themselves are the ones doing the work within the community and creating the change. So, really love that work as well.
Man, that's impressive. With the social support and the social mobility, that's always great for us within our communities because we need to find ways, strategic ways to move forward, and at the same time add value to our communities. So I'm going to jump into the questions, and I like to start with what is the mindset that it takes to make a positive impact?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there has to be a mindset of a relentless pursuit of excellence. And what I mean by that is having a mindset so focused on servant leadership and bringing out the absolute best, whether it's students or whether it's adults. I think that's really at the core of the work. I think once you've gotten in a point in your career and when you've achieved the level of education, the conversation really shifts, especially for Black men, to legacy, not just the legacy of my family, but also the legacy of other families that look like me. And for me, when you start thinking about legacy, your mindset has to shift from a I to a we, and then a we to an extended us. And that's very difficult because to shift from I to us are system changes. And you have to be thinking on a system level. And you don't change systems by doing things the exact same way. Sometimes you have to shake things up. Sometimes you have to break things apart and rebuild them by scratch. And in some cases, you even got to be the rebel in the room to just think differently to change outcomes. So, yeah, you definitely have to have that mindset, but also be strategic and intentional with all the moves that you make. But I think that's the work at least.
I really appreciate that perspective from that relentless pursuit to be strategic in our pursuit. But what I really like what you said in about when it comes to change on a deeper level, we have to make those changes more strategic. And like deep level change real needs system change. And system change leads to us moving forward, and not just individually, but collectively. So I really appreciate that perspective. And as Black men, that's the way we have to think, not about I or we, but as you mentioned, to the extended us. But that will require deep changes, but it's going to take commitment for us to make those kind of change. So I really appreciate that perspective, man. So that leads me to my next question. What advice do you have for the men listening and how they can play a role in creating positive change?
Yeah. The big advice or the thing that I think is most important is you have to participate. And it doesn't matter if it's at what level. What I've come to the realization is that change doesn't happen when you're sitting on the sideline or you're on the bench. You got to get in the game, whether it's in our church, in our families, in our schools, in our organizations, or if we're entrepreneurs. You have to become a part of the type of change that we want to see in the world. I think for me, the biggest advice that I would give, you have to also seek your passion. That's not something, and I think this is a really good streamline into the SEL strategies around mental health. Black men in particular aren't ever told to pursue their passion. We usually are told to, get a job. And
Right.
then once you get a job, right, you go and you get a master's and a doctorate, and I say pursue the career you want, right? That doesn't mean that you're going to be happy. I think at some point you have to pursue things that you genuinely love to do, and in doing that, you channel that inner genius that we all have. That's where I think the magic happens when you're doing work that you're passionate about, and not only passionate, but you can really stamp to cultivate the genius of others. That's when you find that synergy. Like, I believe that when you get people in positions that they are really connected with and they really value, and they love, it create a level of synergy, and those vibrations, that's the difference between great organizations and organizations that aren't so great, right? That's
Correct.
also the difference between, I think I personally believe that that's the difference between bosses and a leader, right? Because, people don't follow bosses, they follow leaders.
Correct.
And leadership is about really tapping into, again, that us mentality versus that I mentality again.
And but I'll just go back from what you said, because that's not really a lot of conversation, especially growing up. We hear about pursuing our passion, find work that can help to sustain your life and stuff like that. And I think that's something that will help change some of the misconceptions and some of the perceptions of us as Black men. Because as you mentioned, if we are doing work that we love, that we're passionate about, we tend to give more. And I like
Exactly.
the point that you have made where it helps to connect that inner genius, because there is something in all of us that once we tap into it, man, it's
Mhm.
like effortless. And then
Yep.
you do more of that work. And I think if we're operating on that level, man, the amount of change would happen. We couldn't give count for it, but it would be more visible because now we're operating on a different level. And I think that is important. And I really appreciate that perspective, because sometimes we don't are not told to pursue our passion and like make it like something that we hear constantly. because I remember the first time I came across like pursue your passion. It was, somewhat strange. What does that mean? But it's
Yeah.
not a conversation that you hear a lot, so it seems strange. What could this passion be? Not realizing that we have something that we can do and how we connect that to what we would love to do. So I really appreciate you sharing that. And know the men listening will appreciate that perspective as well. And that leads me to my next question. How can we, as Black men, help to change the narrative today?
Yeah, that's such a huge question. I think that the direction I want to take it in, I would like to take it to the direction around mental health, if that's okay.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, and when we created CMOC, the collaborative, the Colorado Men of Color Collaborative, I was transitioning. This is during COVID, and if you can't tell, I'm an extreme extrovert. That was a very, isolating state for me, and it took my 12-year-old daughter to say, she said, "Dad, you should probably go get checked out." And she said, "You've just been a little on edge. You hadn't been yourself." And I was like, "I'm fine." And I had to catch myself because now I was just snapping around the house and just in a dark place, man, just not being my knowable self. So I went to my doctor, and I'm fortunate in Colorado, I have a Black doctor. He said, "Brant, you're dealing with depression." And I was like, "Doc, whatever. Seriously? Me out of all people? Come on, man. I'm not dealing with any depression." But he was right, man. He prescribed something for me, and I took that one time. I was like, "Nope, that's not it. That's not going to be the solution to help me because I didn't feel like myself."
Yeah.
But when I came out of that, I said, "Man, he was right. I have been depressed, and nothing I could do could get me out of that funk. It couldn't change the way I felt. It couldn't change the way I saw work or family." It was a weird place for me. When I came out of that, I called a couple guys. I said, "Hey, how are you doing, man? How's your mental health?" And then every guy I called, there's about 5 or 6 of them, they all asked, they were like, "Dude, what's up with you? Like, what's wrong with you? Why are you asking me that question?"
Yeah.
And no, I paused and I let them talk. I said, "No, I'm serious. How is your mental health?" And we were all dealing with the same thing. And they were all struck that nobody has ever asked them that question. And what I discovered is that there were a level of vulnerability that we as Black men, we never had those conversations. There's never been a place safe enough for us in community, at home, at church, to be able to navigate those conversations, right? Because one, there was issues around masculinity, questioning that. Two, there was issues around being just the status in society, right? Our fathers taught us to be strong. You don't cry. You don't talk about your emotions. And man, what I discovered was that it was okay to be not okay, right? And to seek out support and to seek out help. I think that when we started CMOC, we saw and we initially started at mental health because that was the Achilles heel, you could say, that we were recognizing that a lot of Black men were dealing with and didn't know how to seek out support and then seek out help. So I went out and I found other Black males in the mental health fields and social work field and say, would you be willing to support other Black men in the community to talk about these issues? And we put out a huge call to men in general. And before we knew it, we had bankers, we had financial advisors, we had principals, we had superintendents, we had CEOs, we had all these professionals to say, "Hey, man, I would like to do what you're doing. I don't have a mental health background, but I still want to contribute. I want to give back. I want to be a part of this because we all experienced that there was nobody in front of us that had created that pathway and that trajectory for us, even for us who had fathers. The mental health piece was the piece that was missing, and that's how the social mobility piece came in. So it really stemmed from, I guess, to get back to your question, teaching men that advocating for your health, your physical health, is just as important, and it's the same thing as your mental health. And then when your mental health is together, when it's intact, when it's nurturing, when it's thriving, everything else works.
Right.
Because we saw a strong correlation between, and this is the truth, even in the philanthropy space, everything that's funded in relation to men, especially Black men, is restorative.
Wow.
I'm gonna say that again. it's all restorative, right? Restorative justice, right? Restorative job creation, rehabilitation, restorative, right? So all the funding, all the grants, all the opportunities to support Black men in particular were on the restore side. You can also say that that's on the after side, meaning that's after you've done this, after you've gotten in trouble, after you've been convicted, after you've had this point of depression. So what we decided to do as an organization, we said, what would it look like if we design an entire organization that's focused on preventative health for men of color? And it's such an anomaly right now that I can tell you I've been in rooms seeking out funding and people will tell me, we've never seen an organization that wants to prevent Black men from going to prison or prevent the literacy rate amongst young minority youth. So for us, it was an eye-opening piece that evolved from one point, and we started to see the gaps within the system that ultimately led us to where we are right now, where our whole existence is to support men to seek out support to better themselves. Because I know it seems crazy, right? But we have fraternities, we have social organizations. At the end of the day, we have to be able to create the environment and the supports that we want within our community with people who look like us. And
Correct.
that's the model that we built. So seek out support from other professionals, what I would say. Seek out support from men who look like you, who can talk about their lived experience that matches yours and be unapologetic about telling the truth. If you need someone on financial literacy, if you need someone on mental health, if you need someone to talk to you about counseling to get back into school or to pick up a trade, there are enough of us out there. The brilliance is out there, and it's not just Denver. Here's the thing, Dr. Cross. Every American city got African American males that are exceptionally brilliant,
Oh yes. Oh yes. Oh
right?
yes.
The issue has always been the divisions in which we typically have always competed, right? So
Yeah.
people are doing this. Our organization wasn't designed to do that. It was designed to create a circle and to say you come as you are and you give what you can, and that seemed to have worked.
Man, you have said a whole lot
Yeah.
in that response, but which is really good. Really, really good. You have shared a lot of perspective that we need to hear from seeking support and from how we have been taught and how we should be. You see what I'm saying? Because a lot of us grew up where we should not show our emotions. We should not talk about how we feel, and yet we have the same challenges, and that's why we sometimes act out. It comes out in anger and frustration because we don't talk about it. I can remember someone invited me at an event where they were talking to Black men. They were talking this emotional piece. That was my first time about this emotional intelligence. Just talk about how, man, I've never seen so many Black men in one space crying because they touch on that emotion piece that they weren't expressing. And one person started crying, and everybody, because they were there because the court ordered them to be there because they didn't want to take them to jail, so they're giving them time to restore. So, as you mentioned
Mm.
about the restorative piece, so talk to them about what may cause them to act out aggressively to their family, to their wives or kids. And man, it was eye-opening. So pertaining to what you just said, man, that is like really important. And go back to what you have said earlier about COVID. I saw an article, I think it was a little bit after COVID, that they realized that especially us as men, especially Black males who are extroverted, but just in general, Black men realized that they weren't really connected as much as they thought. In that moment when they were at home, and they realized that it led to some being feeling depressed. And it was through connecting intentionally with people that they know, they start to kind of have a change in how they feel. So what you shared, man, it's so important, and I hope the Black men listening take something from that because you shared a lot of value in the response to what we can do to change the narrative because it starts with us,
Yeah.
and I realize that we have to take care of not only, as you mentioned, our physical health, but our mental health as well, which leads me to this next question. What or who has influenced or inspired you to pursue the path that you're on?
Oh man, there's so many people. I grew up in Memphis and the west part of Tennessee. Even to this day, historically, it's a tough place. Tough. What South Memphis is a tough place to grow up in, and I had amazing teachers. I had teachers who, in many cases, attended HBCUs, but they also relentless in saying, "Hey, you're not a product of your community. Just because you live in this neighborhood and you go to school, that's not going to define what you're going to be, Fernando." They would tell me that relentlessly, man. But they will also push me. They would push me, seek out other opportunities, and I was fortunate enough to have a father at home as well. That my dad, man, he would tell us. I'll tell you a quick story. My dad would say, Saturday morning, "Hey, I want you guys to get up and go work with me. We'll go to McDonald's. He'll get us a hot cake and sausage, 6:30 a.m." And we knew we were gonna work that day. Man, from 7:45 to 1 o'clock, we're putting shingles on the roof. And then we get home, we thinking the day over with. He said, "Hey, help me put this tractor on the back of the truck." We're riding around the neighborhood and we're tilling gardens.
Wow.
We get home at 6 o'clock. He'll give us a couple bucks. But the value of hard work,
Yeah.
oh man, and making an honest buck.
Yeah.
I got those lessons at a very young age, and I knew then you're changing shingles in the summertime in Memphis. You learn really quick that, and don't get me wrong, it's I like to work with my hands like with cars, but I knew then that, man, working with my mind was going to be the
Weapon.
direction and getting an education that I was going to pursue.
Yeah.
So that combination of having a strong father that not only laid a foundation, but he gave me real life examples of, hey, this is hard work. If you don't want to go get an education, then this is what you're gonna feel and this is what you're gonna do. I knew by the time I was 18 exactly what my trajectory was gonna be. I might not knew how I was gonna get there, but I knew exactly. I knew the type of work I wanted to do, and I knew the type of impact that I wanted to have, because I just had a great support system of people. And I think that's kind of defined the work that I've done. To be
Okay.
honest with you, the last 30 years.
Man, that's great. As you said, although you didn't really like the hard work, but it instilled the discipline because whatever it takes to do hard work, it's still going to take that kind of discipline to do the mental work. Because if you haven't developed the desire to work, this when it comes to mind work, you still have to push yourself through because a lot of people don't do it because it takes a lot of discipline and commitment. So you develop that discipline through those early stages, as you've mentioned, working with your dad, although you knew then that's not what you want to do. And a lot of us have been on that journey where
Mhm.
we see the hard work and say, man, you know what? This is not what we're going to do. So, man, that's a great story, but it also shows where it lays the foundation to where you are today. And that leads me to my next question. What is your perspective on the current climate of Black men in society today?
My current perspective on Black men in society today. I think we're in a very fragile state right now.
Yeah,
Um, I did my doctorate on the relationship between Black males and law enforcement and how it impacts their leadership. In the middle of that research, we had George Floyd, Jamal Aubrey. We had all those series of events that occurred that one as a researcher and researching 600 years of systematic oppression, and then to see it every day, it was difficult for me. I would say it was almost PTSD, PPTSD. I was living it prolonged every day.
yeah,
And every month it seemed like we were having a different shooting or a different event, right? So it was hard to exist within our melanin in our skin. However, I believe that something happened in this republic that I don't think it's ever happened where people started to see not the injustice, I think they start to see the lack of human dignity
Yeah,
um, granted to people who could be siblings, brothers, cousins, and extended family, right? People who you work with, firemen, fathers, co-workers. And I'm a forever optimist in the sense that I think that, and I hope, and I know that change happens slowly. But I will say I think, and I feel that because of the last 4 years, I see progress happening, and I think it's not just happening as a result of what we see, happening in the media. I think it's happening because I think people's hearts are starting to change a little bit.
I believe so.
Um, in no way am I saying that's going to be a solution alone. I think there has to be again a relentless push for equity and inclusion that is grounded in the human experience. Disproportionately, Black men are at the bottom of every educational and social data point in society. That's not that's not a stretch, that's a fact.
Yeah,
So when we can be factual about data, be really intentional about again strategy, policy making, but also relationship building, right? That's the I called it creating these radical containers of opportunities for Black men to exist in spaces that otherwise they wouldn't have access to. Something magical happens, man. And it doesn't matter if you're at this level or if you're at that level. It's just putting us all in the same room with a common focus and exposing us and exposing other people to us. I think that's the piece that I'm most excited about is that I think now more than ever in society, other people of other races and other demographic groups, they actually question, I don't have any Black friends. Why?
right.
That's a great question. And, my hope with my work in schools and my work in the nonprofit space, I try to break down those barriers as much as possible to allow people to not only have relationships with us, but to see us in all our complexities and uniqueness of gifts in a variety of different fields and experiences to engage in those conversations and dialogue because somewhere in between there it moves from theory to practice and then to change, and that seemed to be a good formula that we found here in Colorado.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that perspective, especially where we are in society. And yes, during those times, during the George Floyd, we start to see change because I've seen people who have never talked about, and some were open to say they didn't realize the level of ill treatment that Black people, especially Black men, were receiving. Because if they're not exposed to it, if they're not in that environment, and some may not be paying attention to what's happening. But as you mentioned, there some change is happening because the awareness, a lot of people were talking about it. So people start to realize that, man, we need to do something. As you mentioned, that if they don't have no Black friends, why you don't? And it's a part of how we all have been conditioned. We over here and they over there and stuff like that. But to go forward, we're still going to need the support of everyone. We're going to need allies to break the barriers, and not just only on our sides, but also on their sides. So it's important that we approach progress from that perspective, where it's going to take a collective effort. And as you mentioned, relationship building, because we do need each other to move forward. And even whilst we work together, as you mentioned, it's still going to take more than just us as collective going forwards, man. But I do appreciate that perspective because in creating change or creating opportunities, we have to work together. We have to work together as Black men or Black people on a whole. But there are other resources out there that we're not privy to. So working with others for those resources, not just for the resources, but for progress, because I believe human beings are the most valuable assets in a community. And if someone doesn't get the opportunity to become all they can be, that community is missing out on
Yep.
a person's contribution So it's important, I believe, that we work together as we go forward, man. So I really appreciate that perspective. And that leads me to my next questions. And some of these questions are somewhat related, are
Mhm.
connected to each other. So the next question is, what change do you want to see in general and amongst Black men?
Yeah. I want to see I want to see Black men becoming the cornerstone of a movement around mental health. I've seen up close, as a teacher, as a mentor, as a coach, as a nonprofit leader, the consequences when mental health at a very early age is not addressed, with our boys, with our teenagers, and with our men. I'm convinced, man, that if we can start, one, not just educating, but putting more Black men in the field of social work, of counseling, of therapy, we're not only going to change the narrative. I think we're gonna blow it out the water. And the reason why I say that is that when you think about these industries are heavily concentrated in many cases. And I think this fact, white women.
Yeah,
I don't have a problem with that, but the issue is that white women will never understand the complexity of the Black male experience in America,
right.
right? So even in counsel, right, you use the strategies, but there's also a missing component. There's a missing piece. Data shows that Black boys that have a Black male teacher or a man of color, likelihood to increase and go to college shoots up to 40%.
Yeah.
That's fact.
Hmm.
So I really believe that some of the consequences that we will see if we can start anchoring this mental health piece to normalize in our societies. One, you're going to see more people going to doctors, right? Because males, if Black males are saying, "Hey, I'm going to get my regular checkup. Hey, I'm going to go talk to someone about this particular thing I'm dealing with," you're more likely to see the ripple effect that happens within the Black family, and therefore you're going to see the ripple effect that's going to happen within the Black community. We don't have that now. And right, this is what, 2023. I can't tell you one community where there is a core focus where Black men seek out support in mental health, and it's community wide. Like this is new. This is like that next emerging thing that's going to. I think there's a strong correlation between mental health and also economic empowerment,
Yeah,
right? Because if we can't cure the mind, if we can't get people in a healthy state of being, it doesn't matter how many job readiness programs we provide. They're still going to be sick, right? It doesn't matter how many CTE programs or resources that we throw at them. They're still going to be sick. So let's go back. Let's cure the mind, right? Because we cure the mind. I know better. I do better.
hmm,
We also, I think, prepare them. I don't believe our people need grit. They got grit.
oh yeah.
They sometimes have setbacks, right?
Hmm.
Just because you have a setback, that's just setting you up for a comeback. Let's support them so that they can use that experience and use those strategies to move forward to help themselves. Because once they help themselves and we give a clear trajectory, they're more than likely to give those same strategies and those supports within the dynamic of the community and the family. And that ultimately leads to economic empowerment.
Man, that is powerful right there, because you're right. Providing the tools to, without addressing self, we still come short, because we're all exposed to the day information, but yet still we're not making the progress as we should be making.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned, that we have to work on that mental health piece, so we are more whole as a person, as individuals, as we go forward. So, and think to break down the barriers, I think that is important. And as you mentioned, economic empowerment requires that we maybe fix our mind, how we think about ourselves, how we think about life and challenges, and how we deal with those challenges. I think will be very beneficial as we go forward, especially when we're thinking about moving the needle or making things better for ourselves and our family. And I know you have mentioned in some part of the conversation about legacy building. It's important that we work on our mind. My next question is, what was a pivotal moment in your life?
Yeah. You mind before I answer that question, just to go back just a little bit?
Yes, no problem.
I also think that there's a consequence if we don't work on self-healing, right? That's why you see a high increase of Black males being re-incarcerated. We never fix the issue, right? So at some point, we have to start thinking about resources in a way, again, preventative resources versus restorative, because we've seen restorative. That ain't work.
Yeah,
That's not economically savvy. It's not economically to the advantage of people who look like us, because we're not going to profit. We're not, I don't know any Black people that own prisons. So I think it's important to call out that at a systematic level, because when people are reincarcerated, unfortunately, somebody is profiting.
yeah.
So why are we going to focus consistently on those restorative things that, for centuries and decades have not happened? Let's work on the mind. Let's fix it. To your next question, you ask it one more time.
What was a pivotal moment in your life?
Oh man, I got a great one for you. I've traveled a lot of places all over the world, and it started when I was about 17. I was lucky enough. Uh, City of Memphis has a program called Memphis in May, where they honor an African country every year, and they take about 15 to 20 students to an African
Wow,
country for a couple weeks. I was 17. I went to Morocco.
wow,
We were outside of Fes City of Fez, around one of the Medinas, and I was walking down the street. And the guy saw me, and he said, "Assalamu alaikum." And back in the 90s, right? Everybody knew somebody say "Assalamu alaikum." He said, "Oh, alaikum salam."
yeah,
Then he looked at me and said, "Yeah, accent, American?" I said, "Yes, sir, I'm American." And he's like, "Oh, so what a great country! So many opportunities." We end up having 30-minute conversation, just stranger around the middle of the street. And at the end of the conversation, somewhere towards the middle, actually, he said, "You know how much privilege you have being an American as a Black man from the South?" Dude, I was like, "Wow." I had been so internalized to the South Memphis experience that I thought it didn't get any poorer, it didn't get any harder or rougher than where I was from. But the fact that this guy saw me, he was like, "Man, you're an American, however you want to look at it. Being an American has privilege. You
wow,
might be a Black man in America, but being a Black man in America, holistically from a global perspective, there's a lot of privilege that comes with that." Blew me away. I was 17. I was like, that was the first time I actually saw somebody who saw me as like me, right? As a Black man, not a Black man who's American, but just a Black man. And then on top of that, he threw in this concept that, hey, as a Black man in America, there is a level of status, there is a level of privilege. And being raised in the South, I didn't think that was possible because I hadn't experienced it. Life-changing experience though, because then I understood that, wow, this is a global market. This is a global world perspective. And the way I was thinking, I was being raised not to a detriment of anyone in my family or my parents. They love me, but within the environment and the streets and the community that I was living in was surrounded within that city. I had the wrong mindset.
yeah,
Um, I had not developed a global mindset of what it meant to be a Black man living in America. And to be honest with you, that was the first time I had the thought, but I probably spent the next 10 years really fine tuning and understanding what that conversation meant.
man. Man, that's powerful. Just you sharing the conversation, and yes, indeed, it was a pivotal moment. I'm not from America. I didn't grow up here, but that was one thing that I've seen, like out of Jamaica, right? I thought when you come here, it was anything is possible. But then I came across young Black men as myself when I got here that really weren't really taking advantage. And sometimes when you talk about the possibilities, you see changes. And I can see where it's easy to take on the false narrative that have been put on a lot of Black males in this country and stuff like that. And especially with what you're doing and talking about the change that you want to see and being the change, I think that gives perspective. But society kind of put a picture on us as Black men, at times where if you're not careful, you take on that perception or the perspective of yourself. Not to say the possibilities are not there, but we start to believe the false narrative, especially if we're in an environment, immediate environment, where we see everybody as modeling that false
Yeah.
narrative that society placed on us. So sometimes, as you mentioned, that the one conversation, and that's the role that we can play now. Sometimes it's just that one conversation with a younger person that can give them the perspective to tap into that inner genius, as you mentioned earlier, when you were sharing your perspective, your thoughts. I think that it's powerful, to say the least, to have the conversations to help, especially younger people, to realize that society can tell you whatever they want to tell you, but that doesn't mean that's who you should be. And I said that because even when I was growing up in Jamaica, I didn't believe what I'm doing today was even possible. There, I couldn't see really how am I going to come out of the situation. But you have the desire, and when your opportunity presents itself, you work with it. But it's conversation at times, man, that we can have with our young people will help to change their perspective. And I really appreciate you sharing that thought.
We need to write a book together, man, because I think, of everything we said, there's so many pieces to. When you were talking, it made me think about Ibram Kendi's book, Forms of Oppression, right? Assimilation and Segregation,
Wow.
and how your experience in Jamaica with that is totally different than my experience as being an African American, but
Yeah.
we still end up taking a specific path to get to where we were.
Yeah.
I wanna backwards plan that, man, because brother, that there, I know your viewers are all gonna be thinking about this. Hey, Dr. Cross and Dr. Branch has already copyrighted it. Don't put it out. We're gonna do it.
Uh, well, but man, we that's a great idea because we start at different points or different places, and you see we're at the same place right now on our journey, and we have different experiences, and a lot of times that perspective needs to be told, not just for our sake, but just for others who are
Absolutely.
coming behind us. So I do take on that challenge, and we will definitely be talking more about
Absolutely.
that perspective, because we have a lot of people that we are supposed to liberate, if we want to accept it or not, because it's not by coincidence that we even encounter the people we have encountered on our journey, to help us to develop the perspective that we have today, so we can break those barriers and overcome the challenges that were in front of us. So I do take on the challenge, because I believe we're here to do great work, as I like to say, because we can't deny our responsibility of being a
Right.
part of creating change. Which leads me to my next question. What life lesson have you learned late in life that you believe is important and can benefit this current generation?
Hmm. One of my teachers always said, she said, "Son, it's a difference between a job and a career." She said, "Job is just over broke." Job. She said, "Career is something you love." When I think about the things I love doing, the cost for doing things that you love is time. The more time that you invest in what you love, the more fruit you will bear.
Right.
The happier you will be, the more sanity you will keep, and the healthier you will live. When you do the opposite of that, time still will be invested if you're not productive. Time will still be invested if the outcomes are not good, if the climate is not present, it's not great. I will tell the next generation to be very cognitive of their time and how they use it.
Mhm.
Because if you want to create real change, you want to go out there and save the world, You're not going to save the world meeting one person a day. Not going to save the world working a 9 to 5, right? You know this just as well as I do. Me being a full-time principal and running a nonprofit. When I get off work today, it'll probably be 7 o'clock, but I know I got 4 hours of work to do with my nonprofit.
That's right.
And it's got to happen if I want that organization to be successful.
Correct.
So there's no substitute for time. What you put in is what you're going to get out of it. And the only person that's going to be responsible is you.
Correct. Correct.
Um, that's that is the greatest advice that I think that I've learned at this stage. And I don't want to say it's simple, but when you learn to appreciate the value of time, you start to understand how it unpacks and opens up success.
Correct. Correct.
Because at the end of the day, you don't have to be the smartest. You can be the hardest worker. And you can outwork those other individuals who are trying to even do the same thing with you.
Yep.
Your merit and your grit and your grind, it'll pull through. But
Man.
balance the sacrifice though, because the sacrifice, it's gonna be family, it's gonna be time with kids, it's gonna be maybe a vacation here or there, but that just comes with the maturity, I think. So definitely time.
Oh yeah, there's no excuse. If you have something to do, you just have to do it. As you mentioned, working your full-time job and still find time for your passion or where you find that you will make a greater impact. It's important. It's our responsibility to use our time well. As you've mentioned, is not those who have worked with the most talent, but those who are willing to work, do the work, put in the time, make the sacrifice, will achieve the goals. And you may have seen this for yourself, where individuals may be considered smarter, considered more talented, and they weren't the
Mm.
one that received the opportunity. It was an individual who put in the work that receive the opportunity. So thanks for sharing that perspective, because those coming behind of even at our age are individuals professional, not just the younger generation, but we have to realize that we have to put in the work. It's what we do that's going to reward us, regardless of how we want to take it. We have to pay our dues to achieve the goals we have for ourselves. But before I ask my final question, where can the listeners find you and help support your work that you're doing to make a difference?
Yeah, you can find me on pretty much any Google platform or social media. Type in Fernando Branch, Fernando Branch, BR. Been a long day, Branch. You can also, I'm on all the social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook. If you want to reach me at Colorado Men of Color Collaborative, you can connect with me at fbranch@cmocc.org. If you want to connect with me on the K-12 space, it will be Fernando underscore branch at dpsk12.net.
Okay. And I'll definitely put a way to connect with you in the description. So whenever the listeners be watching or listening, they can still reach out to you, because I believe the work that you're doing is really needed. So, man, whichever way we can support, we're going to. And it's important that we support each other in our respective field of work or in our purpose, because that's what it's going to take to make the impact that we all want to make. It's not what we do individually, but what we do collectively. So I'll
Exactly.
definitely have it in the description so they can connect with you. So my final question: what impact do you want to have on the world?
Hmm. Before I had children, I wanted to be popular and famous to leave an impact. I wanted people to know that I did a good job. I lived with a clear purpose and meaning with conviction. After I have kids, I have two girls, London and Lauren, 12 and 8. The impact I want to have, believe it or not, man, I just want it to be, I want to, I want them to know that, hey, their dad was a good dad. And this has been growing on me for a long time, but the more I'm learning to be a father of 2 girls, I think that if I'm a good dad, I think they would know that I was a good dad or a good mentor or a good teacher to others. And that's my goal. I don't think about the statues and popularity or to be famous. I just want my girls to know that I was a really good dad, not just to them, because well, if I was a good great dad to them, I believe that will, create the ripple effect that they know that I was good to everybody that came in contact with me, and I truly lived within my purpose.
Man, that's great, and that is still admirable. It's not, as you mentioned, your first goal was to be popular and famous, but being a great father, especially some of the negative things that they say about black men, and on a whole, which there are statistics that says black men still are present more than other races within their household. So, but man, being a great father is really admirable achievement. So, man, that's great and a great impact because it will definitely give your daughters an example of what they should be looking for, as later on in their lives and stuff like that. So, man, but man, it was great talking with you. Man, you've
Likewise.
shared, yeah, man, you shared some great perspective, knowledge, and insights that I believe is beneficial. And I think the audience also have gained a lot from this conversation. So, Dr. Branchman, it's a pleasure having you here on the Black Male Impact.
Man, it's an absolutely an honor, and look forward to the opportunity again one day.
Man, we're going to definitely, because as you mentioned, the mental health, doing a series of panel discussions. So we'll talk further. So maybe, and I'm doing it by state. So I may just choose Colorado for addressing mental health. And we get maybe a few of the guys from your group to participate and talk about the importance of mental health. Because as you mentioned, that is something that we need to discuss as we live out our lives and stuff like that. So, but again, man, thanks for being here.
Hey, I appreciate it, brother. Thank you.
Okay. Listeners, again, it's a pleasure to be here with you on the Black Male Impact. As always, our goal is to bring guests that we believe will be beneficial to you and will leave with you insights, knowledge that can help you to move forward. Our goal is to inspire positive change, and we continue to go on that path. And wherever you can support our journey on making an impact, please do. Thanks again for being here on the Black Male Impact.